Happy World Lipodystrophy Day, almost. It is officially on the 31st, but today is a wonderful day for us to all come together, literally from around the world, to celebrate our community, our growing community, and our growing research network, and all the advancements in lipodystrophy. I am now chief advisor and co-founder and a board member for Lipodystrophy United. We have a very rapidly growing team. And I just want to say a big, big thank you to Kate and Sharon for their vision for this day. And then our newest member, Francesca, as well as our guiding light in all of this are really our researchers who've cared for us and dedicated their careers to improving our lives. And so Dr. Oral and Dr. Akinci, and we've got a few other folks joining us later today that I want to acknowledge. But we can't do it without each other. And so today is the very best day for us to come together, see each other, and continue to build on this momentum. You're on mute, Kate.
What was the moment that World Lipodystrophy Day started and why?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that. World Lipodystrophy Day became official with our partners in Spain, Elif. They have an association in Spain, and it's in honor of their daughter Celia. Celia had a very rare type of generalized lipodystrophy, and she passed when she was quite young. And all of the work that they do in Spain is in her honor. And again, we're global partners. So what better way to show collaboration, but to take on that day ourselves and celebrate it.
Thank you so much for a great intro. And if anyone has questions about World Lipodystrophy Day, just pop them in the chat and we'll answer them throughout. We thought it would be powerful to start with an optimistic patient story from Diana Kidder. So if you would like to share your screen, Sharon, we're going to just play a quick story.
Hello, everybody. My name is Diana Kidder, and I was diagnosed later in life with lipodystrophy, familial partial lipodystrophy type 2 Dunnigan's form. That's a whole big lot of words to, to say, and it's hard to say. But it's actually harder to live with. But life is good. I never thought that I would be able to say that I celebrated my 70th birthday and I am alive with this disease. There's many thoughts that go through my mind with all of that, but I'm very blessed that I have lived through it. Things started, though, from the time of my birth. I had very strange things happen to me along the way. The day I was diagnosed was kind of, looking back at it, it's a little bit funny because a doctor come into the room. I was at University of Michigan finding out about CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, for my diabetes, which my diabetes has been totally crazy for many, many, many years prior to this diagnosis. And the most difficult thing was to stay true to myself and make sure that I was eating right, exercising like all the doctors kept telling me, and I know they weren't believing me, but I was. I worked very hard, and I think that's probably why I'm still alive at 70 years old. It's becoming harder and harder, but life is good. I'm looking forward to keep living my life all the way through fully, and I want to encourage any newly diagnosed people, especially if you're younger and you find out you have this disease, there are people that will talk with you to help you. We want to all be there for you. We have to be a community with this. And so I will make my phone number available for anybody to contact me, and I'll help wherever I can. Thank you very much.
I love that story. It's so optimistic. We're going to start off for just 15 minutes explaining our work and our organizational plan for 2025 and beyond before we move into a talk from both Dr. Oral and Dr. Akinci. I never know how to say your name. I'm so sorry, Baris.
Oh, that's fine. That's very difficult, actually. So Akinci is fine. So it's
Akinci.
if the correct way is Akinci, but it's very difficult.
Oh, okay. I'll
I'm
say
fine with
Akinci.
Akinci.
It's easier for me.
No
I love
problem.
that we clarified that because I kind of just go over it and say, oh no, I did that wrong. But we're just going to give a quick presentation and you can interrupt us with questions. So I'm going to share my screen. So first of all, does everyone see the Wordly? If you don't see the Wordly, you can scan this QR code on your other device and see translations. This is a picture that we took at the symposium in November in partnership with University of Michigan. A lot of people are joining this movement, so I love this picture. Wanted to quickly say thank you to our team. Sharon, who's the research director and board secretary. We actually met because I was going to Endo last year and she emailed me and said, hey, how can I help you? And now we work full-time together. So it's a really special connection. And having an actual researcher on our team is really helpful when we talk about science and getting more serious and recognized by our partners. You met Andra Stratton earlier. She's the chief advisor and board member. I'm the executive director. We just hired someone new, Francesca, who's on. She's the operations manager. Larry is the chief financial advisor and also the board president. Lori is a community support liaison and the head of the newsletter committee. And finally, Crystal is a community support liaison and leads our Tea with Lou community chats. So I want to just say our mission and vision. Our mission is to increase awareness and understanding of lipodystrophy among the patient community, medical professionals, and stakeholders. That's been our vision, our mission from the start. Right now, our vision for the future is more accurate diagnoses, quality care, effective treatment, and maybe one day a cure. I want to quickly go over our achievements in 2024 because we were really proud of what we were able to do. Almost 8,000 people visited our website. We had over 10,000 social media views. We had over $150,000 funds raised, which helped directly with our community and advocacy. We had 100+ symposium attendees in collaboration with the University of Michigan. We work in 4 main areas: advocacy, research, community, and then of course our development and operations. This year, we really want to establish and advance advocacy initiatives to amplify the patient/caregiver voice and drive systemic change in lipodystrophy care. What that looks like is going to medical conferences to explain the patient perspective of lipodystrophy, really partnering with our scientists and clinicians to explain lipodystrophy from all perspectives, and also working with our global group. every year. There are many groups all over the world, and we all have the same mission. So really aligning those missions and working together as a global advocacy group. We hope to advance patient-centered research that improves understanding, diagnosis, and treatment of all forms of lipodystrophy. We're really fostering a strong and engaged and informed community of individuals and families affected by lipodystrophy. This event is an example of community. And of course, we want to strengthen our infrastructure as an organization, secure long-term funding, and expand our ability to serve the community. I just want to show the breakdown of our budget. 37% of our budget is going towards advocacy this year, because we really want to communicate to doctors and all stakeholders what lipodystrophy is. We really want to spread awareness, and that's what advocacy looks like for us. 23% community, so that's a lot of a few in-person family days, and also events like this. And research. We're really focusing on research this year, having Sharon on the team, submitting abstracts, collaborating with researchers, and then 9% to operations and 5% to development. So we're collaborating with global lipid and endocrine HCPs, which are healthcare providers, through attendance of Endo and NLA. We also submitted an abstract with our survey that we did. A lot of you answered that survey, and it got approved for both the Endo and the NLA. So we'll be presenting our own research as well. We engage with national policy at the National Organization of Rare Diseases and the Rare Disease Week on the Hill that I did in February. We're engaging with federal regulators via the NIH and FDA, which right now is looking a little bit less engaged because of their reduced capacity in this new administration, but we're continuing our efforts to collaborate with regulators. We're engaging with industry, especially Chiesi and Regeneron, our industry partners, via regular calls and in-person meetings, and we're engaging with the Global Lipodystrophy Leaders Forum. This year, we're going to try something new with community and have a few in-person community days. They're not going to be like the symposium because they won't be medical. It'll just be for community. We hope to meet in Dallas, DC, and Michigan at some point this year. These will be smaller than last year's symposium, but they might just be fun ways to engage with other patients and families. And of course, we're really doing a lot of social media and communications for our community, and a monthly newsletter, and really developing our website and strengthening it more and more. And we also hope to develop a formalized patient ambassador program so more people can represent our mission and really understand the science of lipodystrophy. Of course, we are always looking for innovative funding strategies. If anyone has any ideas, let me know. We have a new member of our team, which is really helping us with our operations. We're developing our committees. We're expanding our volunteer team. And we're really standardizing our operational procedures to really expedite our work. And Sharon, I would love for you to talk about research.
Thanks, Kate. First, I want to say that I'm really honored to be a part of this community and Lipodystrophy United. All of you are really amazing, and I'm really, really proud of what we did so far and what we are going to do. So as Kate said, we want patients' voices to be heard, and we want our research to be patient-centered. So as Kate mentioned, we did a survey for symposium, and since then, about 50 patients and caregivers answered our survey about the burden of disease. We sent an abstract to NLA and Endo, so two of the biggest conferences for lipodystrophy in the US, and both got accepted for poster presentation. So your voices are being heard, which is amazing. We also want to start collect more patient data, both on burden of disease, mental health, just information so we can help researchers advance their research as well. We want to have all of the community to be able to read the research that we are publishing and all of the researchers are publishing. So we want to make sure that we can get you all the research in simple language that you can understand, and just work with all of our partners all over the world to get your voices heard. So thank you.
And again, I want to share the schedule of today. We have our incredible Dr. Oral speaking in a couple minutes. She gets a little bit of extra time, which we'll probably need for questions. And then we'll have a talk by Dr. Baris Akinci. And then we'll have a Q&A panel. If you haven't already brainstormed questions, think of questions now. This is your opportunity to ask the experts your questions. So really important to figure out a way to ask your questions and quickly, because we have a lot of questions to get through. And remember, we're not asking any personal health questions. These are more general questions. Any questions we don't get to, we'll follow up. Then we'll have a lifestyle talk with Zainab Alzoubi. She is a new member of our community. She actually has lipodystrophy herself, so I'm really excited to hear from her. She's an internist or a diabetic intern right now, so she knows about lifestyle for lipodystrophy, and she's new to this community, but has a lot of great insights. So we're really excited. And then we have an update on global collaboration with Sonia Rehal, who is the leader in Canada. So we're really excited about today, and we'll also try to give everyone breaks. But with that, I would love to give it up for Dr. Oral. Actually, I'm going to do a formal introduction of Dr. Oral. She's a professor in the Division of Metabolism, Endocrinology, and Diabetes at the University of Michigan. She's originally from Turkey, and Dr. Oral completed her medical education at the University of Istanbul and her residency in internal medicine at Sinai Hospital in Detroit. She later completed a fellowship in endocrinology, metabolism, and diabetes at the National Institute of Health, where she focused on diabetes research. She's internationally recognized for her pioneering work on leptin and its role in rare lipodystrophy syndromes, contributing to the FDA and EMA approvals of metroleptin as a treatment. Her clinical and research interests include insulin resistance, obesity, lipid disorders, and diabetes, with the focus on identifying new metabolic diseases and treatment strategies. She's really our pioneer and the person that everyone recommends to go see if you've been diagnosed with lipodystrophy or for a lipodystrophy diagnosis. So we're so excited to have her. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kate, and it's an honor for me to speak. It's really remarkable to see the progress that the community has made, and it's really, really wonderful. And I love that picture that we took in Ann Arbor. So I also have it here. So my talk is about honoring the past, sort of giving you updates on where we are today, but also dreaming the future together as well. So can everybody see my slides? Okay, so these are my disclosures. You know, I think it's important for you to know that I do consulting work for stakeholders who want to develop therapies for lipodystrophy. And I also have some intellectual property rights from the use of metroleptin in lipodystrophy. And the rest of them are here, so for you to take note as well. Lots of research in my group, so we do have sponsors from ranging from the government to pharmaceutical company. I do want to tell you a little bit about my story. So I was born and raised in Turkey. I have to note that I was a chubby child, you know, that's an important fact about me. And I did struggle with my weight as a teenager, and there was a lot of type 2 diabetes history in the family. And I learned about the insulin receptor in high school. and was interested in sort of learning about the insulin receptor. And so within 10 years of graduating high school, I found myself at the NIH, and I ended up working with Simeon Taylor, who was a pioneering researcher in the insulin receptor. He was the person who had defined the first human insulin receptor mutations. So I found myself at NIH, and I wanted to learn more about diabetes and its different forms. So let's see if I can advance the slides. So I was looking for a clinically relevant project with fat cells in my mind. And what did we know about fat cells at that time? We knew that they were insulin responsive cells, that they helped to store energy, and they also made hormones. It was a new concept at the time. Sorry, my computer wants to update now, so I have to kind of get out of that. Let's see how I do get out of it. I'm sorry. It's doing its own brain freeze. How do I get out of it? Okay, here we go. Can you see my slide still? Okay, good. Okay, so that was a new concept, that the fat cells were making hormones. Leptin was relatively newly discovered and was really exciting for me. So as I was looking for a project, my boss, Dr. Taylor, mentioned that there was a group of patients that the NIH has seen that had lipodystrophy syndromes, and whether or not I wanted to meet them. So at the NIH, you had the ability to bring patients to your continuity clinic. And then on a fateful afternoon in 1996, I ended up seeing two patients in my clinic. The first one is this 16-year-old who I saw, who had very high triglycerides, severe insulin resistance, very difficult to control diabetes. And she also had history of recurrent pancreatitis, metabolic liver disease. She described continuous hunger, excessive sweating, heat intolerance, especially after she ate. She had preoccupation with food, anxiety, depression, pain, and fatigue. And she had no fat in her body, on the exam. She did not have any of her family members impacted. She had a wonderful mother who was very supportive. So, and then right after that, I ended up meeting this older lady who had paucity and deficiency of peripheral adipose tissue, but she had fat around her face and neck, and she also had insulin resistance, high triglycerides. Her liver was also fatty. She had coronary artery disease in herself and in her family members, and she described anxiety, depression, pain, and fatigue. And it was very clear that there was this autosomal dominant inheritance in the family. It was passed from generation to generation. So really, just seeing those two patients made me fall in love with fat all over again. Why would the metabolic problems of fat deficiency be the same as having too much fat? And why these different presentations, generalized versus partial, and why present at birth in one patient versus another around puberty? And it was very clear that both patients had unmet medical need. So I thought that this would be a great research topic just to start working on. And I really wanted to do something for the patients, for their therapy. So I thought that if I were to work on trying to figure out molecular mechanisms, we should also couple our efforts with a therapy study. At the time, so then, I got myself into this research for the next decade or two. It never really stopped, right? During that time, we learned about the heterogeneity in lipodystrophy. We learned about the different subtypes, that you all know. So it's not one disease, many diseases. And then there's also lots of different genetic forms of disease, right? We have actually, I was lucky enough to work on the discovery of some of these particular genetic forms. There are now more than 30 different genes that we know, maybe even more. if we're actually trying to like line up all the diseases that present with lipodystrophy, and really the list has gone up really over 40 or so right now. So what's really highlighted in red here are the genes that are more common or better recognized, but there are others. So this kind of work kept us really busy for the next decade or two. And no matter what disease we were faced with, there were the common themes of insulin resistance and dyslipidemia, and the severity of the disease sort of correlated with the severity of lipodystrophy or the severity of fat loss. So on one end of the spectrum, where there was the worst insulin resistance, were the patients who had the single gene generalized lipodystrophy syndromes, but our patients with partial lipodystrophy who also had single gene mutations followed. And then there are others that present perhaps with multiple genes coming together, but still have lipodystrophy, that are very close to individuals in the general population that present with the Apple phenotype. And insulin resistance, and finding that blurred line has been an important mission for our research as well. Along this time, many groups have, as the genes were being discovered, there were these efforts of creating animal models, and the single genes were knocked out, or also some researchers have figured out ways to really ablate fat cell development more globally. But regardless of whatever strategy that was used, the animals always developed insulin resistance, high triglycerides, fatty infiltration of liver and other tissues, and interestingly, taking fat from litter mates, which is something you could do in animal research, rescued metabolic abnormalities. So, and as I told you, I was sort of really focused on trying to figure out therapies, or at least offer therapies, as we were trying to uncover mechanisms, even from day one. So since fat transplant is not feasible, our first question was, can we make patients grow fat? And, that project was developed under mentorship of Simeon Taylor. In my early days, troglitazone was just coming into the market, which was the first PPAR gamma agonist. Some of you may remember, and then there are still some drugs from this class, Actos or Avandia, but troglitazone was sort of like the very first drug that was getting approved. So we did a study with troglitazone, and that was like my way of meeting many patients who wanted to participate in this treatment study. But it became very clear that we couldn't enroll our most severely affected patients into the troglitazone study. And those patients who had the most severe form of lipodystrophy, who had liver abnormalities, and that excluded them from this troglitazone study because troglitazone turned out to be toxic to the liver, they all had very low leptin levels. Okay. And as I mentioned, they had the most severe forms of lipodystrophy with the most unmet medical need. So we asked a question whether we could replace leptin in these patients. And that project, started under the mentorship of Simeon Taylor, but by the time we actually were able to get our study launched, Phil Gordon became my mentor because Simeon left the NIH. So this journey was fueled a lot by this one incredible young woman who was carried to the NIH by her father. And he actually begged me, doctor, do something for my daughter. We've knocked on many doors. We've seen many different doctors, and nobody has been able to do anything for her. So she had a big liver. She had all these xanthomas around her body, and giving her every medication that we could. We couldn't keep her triglycerides at a reasonable range, so we had started to do plasmapheresis with hopes of impacting her pain syndrome and her severe hepatomegaly. And we could do such a heroic intervention at the NIH. And that venture took about 2 years, during which time we kept knocking on the door of leptin's manufacturer to give us leptin. So 3 things had to fall into place, before we were able to get the permission to give leptin. First, Amgen's leptin obesity trials had to fail. Second, Steve O'Reilly and Sadaf Faruqi had to sort of treat their first human patients with leptin mutations and had good results. And third, Nobel laureates Brown and Goldstein had to give leptin to an animal model of lipodystrophy to show that it was effective. When all those 3 things happened, then the tides turned towards us, and Amgen gave us permission to launch our study. And this journey officially started in July 1st of 2000. And within a few months of starting the study and really building on the leptin dose, nobody had done it before, so we had to do a little bit of dose finding, and we were a little scared to give a large dose at the beginning. So within a few months of starting our leptin therapy in our patient, the triglycerides levels started to come down, as shown over here, and we were able to see that her serum was coming out clear compared to having a milky color. You could see the transition, this remarkable transition with your eyes as well. So we stopped plasmapheresis, and we continued leptin therapy. We were able to also reduce our other diabetes therapies and other lipid therapies as well. And her hemoglobin A1C came down, and we had this really remarkable response with an MRI that we could also prove. So other patients followed. By the time we had treated the first 9 patients, we knew that leptin really worked well for severe lipodystrophy. And the results were so remarkable that these got published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and then a story was born. During this time, I had to follow my heart and move to University of Michigan. I got married and moved to University of Michigan. And when I first came to Michigan, I was thinking of working on leptin, but not necessarily lipodystrophy, because I thought that it would be hard to ask the patients to come to Michigan, of all places, when the NIH had the budget to bring patients. But fate has it, when it's your fate, it follows you. And, I really do believe that certain things are written for us. And this was written for me. So again, one patient found me. She was in desperate need, and she couldn't go to NIH despite initial referrals made there. And then because we wanted to treat her, we then launched a leptin therapy program here in Michigan. We now know that she has actually a rare form of T10I lamin mutation, and really just the need to treat her gave rise to my program at Michigan. And then I think the rest is really history thereafter. I was also able to launch a study to study leptin's effects in the liver, in more common liver disease, which was more on my mind when I first came to Michigan. It turned out to be a really difficult study to do. During that time, really, I had to do a lot of effort for finding the funding. Then leptin changed a lot of hands. But lo and behold, we were able to complete that study and publish it. And Baris really helped me publish that old study as well. Dig through all the data and everything. But as we got that study funded, we were also able to fund a study in partial lipodystrophy and leptin therapy. And that's how my paths crossed with Andra and a lot of others on this call. And then again, we were able to study leptin's effects not only on metabolic parameters, but on a lot of different aspects of biology. There are more than 100 papers done by us and others around the country. And, you know, all of that work led to creating a packet that went to the FDA for approval of leptin in 2013, end of 2013. And by the beginning of 2014, leptin was approved as a therapy for severe lipodystrophy in the US. 2 years later, European Medicinal Agency approved leptin not only for generalized lipodystrophy, but also for forms of partial lipodystrophy who were not responsive to conventional therapies. So then the guidelines changed forever and metroleptin came into guidelines. And then lots of transformation followed. You know, I think, you know, in a rare disease, having an approved therapy changes things, and the world changed. So the clinical attention increased, more patients get diagnosed. There's a birth of registries around the world, biorepositories, and then patient advocacy increases. It gets born. So this ends up being an engine for innovation and progress. So in terms of like this transformation of clinical attention, you know, the first thing that happened was getting clinical guidelines for diagnosis and treatment. We wrote the first guidelines in 2016. And again, I think this is a new era for lipodystrophy clinically. Thereafter, research also fastened. There's biomarker discovery for subtypes, acceleration of genetic testing, and then imaging modalities for diagnosing lipodystrophy, and then perhaps introduction of AI, you know, have all come into the clinical talk. One thing on the world of imaging, my group has done some work with fat shadows and DEXA scans, and you know, this is now allowing us to develop some objective criteria for diagnosing lipodystrophy. And again, I think that's also going to change the approval process at the FDA. Baris and Merve, who I saw join, are doing work with MRIs, and we've been supporting them as well. So I do believe that those bringing objective imaging criteria is going to help the community and drug development all at large. The other thing that I wanted to mention is this birth of registries and biorepositories. Originally, you know, after leptin's approval, the first thing that happened was retrospective data collection. This was a multi-center effort, and we were able to publish it through collaborations with Turkey, Brazil, and the United States to show that there is impact of lipodystrophy to lifespan and lots of comorbidities. But now I'm really proud to say, and many of you have participated in our long-term prospective registry for collecting data on lipodystrophy syndromes. We had originally envisioned this as only a 4-year study, 4-year follow-up, but now we have been able to extend follow-up to 16 years, and the goal is to recruit a total of 500 participants. And we've really have broken the 350 mark in the last few weeks, and really approaching 400 now. We had at this data cut, the data is at 242, but we're far over that. Brazil has joined, and we're reaching, as I said, almost 400 pretty quickly, and really showing the burden of disease across lipodystrophy subtypes. We are also, this registry was born with a lot of support from Andra. She played a crucial role in designing it, from day one. And we were able to add important endpoints that include very detailed assessments of quality of life, mood, depression, anxiety, those kinds of things. And we have a very rich data set. We've heard what you all told us about the depression, anxiety, and pain, and we have very good measurements right now that documented very objectively. And I'm very proud to say that hopefully we'll be able to publish those papers this year. And I'm already able to put the data when I write disability letters for the community members. So that's been a really important thing. And then seeing the patient advocacy increase, I probably don't even need to spend too much time. You already have said, you're the prime example of this. In 2014, we had a symposium in Ann Arbor, which was a call for global action. And that was shortly after leptin was approved. And since then, there's been this substantial awareness around the world. The drug is now approved in US, UK, Europe, and Japan. There's multiple registries across the globe, multiple patient advocacy organizations, support groups, social media outlets, patient stories out there. And this is all from the vision of putting patients first. We have done conferences for patients and with patients. We've given the podium to our patients to make sure that their voices were heard. They came before us because we're doing all of this for our patients. This is the reason of our existence, really. We are here to serve you, and to get your voices heard. Seeing all these community meetups, social media streaming sessions, and everything else has been really like the joy of my life, really. And also making sure that the high resource therapies that are now approved or being talked about, will not leave any patient behind in any place in the world. That should be our goal and our marching goals. So with all of that happening, all of that transformation, I also said in 2016 that my program needs a reform as well. So now we have this really solid goals of our program of defining novel forms of disease, searching new disease mechanisms, searching novel therapies, and then translating knowledge to other diseases and into societal benefit, and taking lessons from other disciplines and bringing them to our patients as well. So that translation is bilateral. So our program is very structured. We have we're supported by our Diabetes Institute. We have a scientific steering committee for our scientific questions. We've built a translational research pipeline, and we're here to do local and national synergy building with everyone. And we're actively doing business development as well. More recently, we've been seeing 2 to 4 new patients every week. We've really streamlined our genetic workup. Medical geneticists offer counseling and expertise to our patients. And we're also doing the systematic collection of plasma and serum to look at immune markers as well and other biomarkers. Özge has recently joined the team and is working on that. There are many faces that you might have seen here, Joyce Patterson, our dietitian, Kim, our nurse, and then our genetic counselors and some of my colleagues, who have helped join the team. Patients come in They're evaluated by mostly me, but maybe one of my partners. And then we can offer a medical genetics evaluation. And from there, most patients are getting formal genetic testing if it wasn't done before. And that may lead us to a definitive diagnosis or a possible diagnosis or no diagnosis. Sometimes we say like the question sort of goes into hibernation. That doesn't mean it's ever forgotten, until we see another patient who presents the same way. Sometimes it hibernates a little bit, but it's like playing a memory game or clustering cards. If patients present like with similar ways, we could always come back and then compare genetic findings from patients to find answers. And then if we have like an interesting lead, then our scientific committee, steering committee, gives us the green light. So we put our resources into the right questions to pursue really mechanistic studies. We have lots of different cohorts that are growing within our program. You might see your condition here on this list, but there are others, much smaller cohorts as well. Doing this has helped us really find answers for some of our patients, and sometimes finding that answer made us have an aha moment, scientifically as well. For example, let's look at an example. This young woman who I had seen in really dire straits, and she came in with liver failure, and she had a very complicated story, had lots of autoimmunity in the background, and she had autoimmune disease in her family as well. And doing genetic studies in her made us realize that she had a genetic problem on an immune regulation gene called CTLA4. And, this was interesting because there were cancer therapies that were being developed to inhibit this pathway. And lo and behold, when we looked after we saw her, we actually found patients who developed lipodystrophy taking those drugs for their cancer. So this case led to individuals being treated with checkpoint inhibitors who developed lipodystrophy. A big collaboration then led to identification of a new autoantibody that is now a marker of autoimmune form of lipodystrophy, and then exploration of additional immune regulating genes as a cause of lipodystrophy, and then exploration of novel therapies for immune mediated lipodystrophy. So this is that paper that I'm talking about with the perilipin antibody being discovered. And then, the other thing that I'm really proud of sharing with you is putting together this team Laminae. This team was born during the COVID lockdown. When Ormond decided to dedicate a part of his lab working on the Laminae-related lipodystrophy, and this work was born because after 15 years of being my neighbor, Ormond was convinced that he should help me. And he had knocked out the laminae gene in the fat tissue and had found that the animals developed a disease that recapitulated the human disease. And that really got him interested. And then, this program was born. And shortly after, we were able to get this huge NIH grant that allowed us to create new tools. Now we have the inducible knockout model, where, Jess, the graduate student, is able to turn off laminae specifically in the adipocyte with tamoxifen injection. You could create these tools, with using genetic engineering strategies. And then that really allows us to look at the immediate impact of having no laminae in the fat tissue. And with that, we're really learning that there is an upregulation of immune cells and inflammation immediately after turning off the laminae in the adipose tissue, and the lipidation and mitochondrial disturbance. And interestingly, with your help, with patients and families sort of devoting themselves to our research, we now have this translational project where we were able to recruit young patients with lamin A mutations who haven't fully expressed their disease, that are coming in for serial biopsies. And then their older relatives are also giving us biopsy samples, as well as their unaffected family members. And then, by comparing everyone's data, we're then able to sort of really learn that immediate, disease mechanisms. And, our cohorts display everything that we wanted to see, in terms of their differences. But most interestingly, we're seeing that the fat tissue of lamin A related disease is very inflamed and fibrotic, even in the depots that are preserved. And again, that was an eye-opening realization for me. And, and then we're able to reproduce findings from the patients and the animals side by side. And I do believe that we'll be able to now, like with this realization, target inflammation as a potential therapy avenue for our patients with lamin A related lipodystrophy. Another thing that we've learned is that there's a important mitochondrial perturbation, and that will create another avenue of therapy as well. Now, Orban's group has put in human mutations that we observe in patients into the animal and created models. Sometimes our patients come in and say, "Oh, where is my animals? That have my mutation," and visit the animals. So again, we're really wanting to learn from these models to bring our understanding back to our patients. I believe you remember, when Jess presented at the symposium, the wheel experiments that they were doing, how the animals with the mutations are not choosing to voluntarily to exercise. And, that's sort of like a pretty good model now to understand the fatigue, that our patients describe and experience. And then again, the whole goal for us is really to find novel therapies after these realizations. And then this slide is here to show you that, by identifying a brand new mutation in one of our patients, we then created cellular models to show that it was actually that particular genetic finding that was the cause of disease. And then we created a mouse model of the variant as well that recapitulated the human disease. And again, now our goals are finding a therapy out of all of this. So now, when we see a patient with lipodystrophy and we identify a gene variant of unknown significance, we can rapidly test in an in vitro model and then create an animal model. And then if the animal model recapitulates the human disease, that does open, or these cellular models open the door for rapid therapeutic screening. So the number of variants that we're pursuing has really increased. And with increasing funding, hopefully we could answer all of these questions. That's our goal. In terms of the search for novel therapies, on the leptin front, we've been testing leptin in a different subtype of disease. It's called medullung disease. This is sort of a hybrid of lipomatosis and lipodystrophy. This is our new story. And then we've also launched, in collaboration with Regeneron, a therapy program with mebavedemab. And that's sort of progressing well, and that's already been translated to patients with neutralizing antibody presence, not only in lipodystrophy, but also with monogenic obesity due to leptin receptor mutations. Here's a patient in Turkey who was treated with this drug, through our efforts, who's doing really well. And then we've tested ApoC3 inhibition as a target. I'm very proud of the completion of this study. This decision was taken in our symposium back in Ann Arbor in 2014. And within a period of like 7 or 8 years, we were able to complete a global study that was like a consensus decision from that therapy. And then now the study is complete. And this particular drug has some side effects. And the US FDA didn't approve it, but it's an approved therapy for FPLD in Brazil. And here in the US, a newer generation therapy is going to hopefully be approved as an option for people with all forms of severe elevated triglycerides. And then, I think another thing that we have worked on has been really control of food intake as an acute intervention in familial partial lipodystrophy. In one patient who needed to achieve immediate results, a very low calorie diet produced immediate impact. And that gave us the ammunition, our good experience with very low calorie diet gave us the ammunition to explore the novel therapies that are used for weight loss across the diabetes spectrum in lipodystrophy as well. We were able to publish our own clinical experience about in 2020. I think the paper came out in 2024, and then more recently with tirzepatide, known as Zepbound or Mounjaro. The paper is in print ahead of publication. Actually, it's online ahead of print. So we do, and we're about to launch a prospective trial with tirzepatide in familial partial lipodystrophy. So we're very excited about the prospect of this, and perhaps also bringing a combination therapy of leptin and tirzepatide together for patients with familial partial lipodystrophy as well. So again, a disease transforms society in general. Dedicated attention to patients transforms society in general. So I don't think our work gets unnoticed. We are able to raise these discussions of hard ethical questions, saving the most in need versus addressing the most prevalent problems. That those questions are always on the table, and showing our examples of the big impact we're able to bring to our patients, and bringing the tenet that saving one person is saving the whole world. I think this is really important. And then there's this magic of high impact therapy, even in small numbers. It makes us remember the treasure of life and the value of gratitude. And then, our conference happened in the middle of chaos in the world. We are here from around the world in the middle of chaos in the world. We're going through hard times everywhere. But the fact that we are here together is like a testament that, we can make it better despite everything that's going around the world. And together we're all strong. And we're going to be stronger by coming together. So our dream is to collectively work together, standardize these disease definitions, outcome measures, work with the community to develop patient interest, outcome measures, improve therapies, and determine best practices. And before this decade is over, I know time is running out. We will show the proof of concept for cell replacement therapy and first cures. I really truly believe that in my heart, and I'm committed to doing all of it, whatever it takes to make that a reality, with all of you here. We're going to somehow figure out how to do functional recovery or editing, gene editing. So we never really forget our why. We're here for you and with all of you. I wanted to share, I'm like I grew up, I became older, my kids have grown. I want to show them to you, my husband and my 2 boys, and then my team, and with Ormond's team, we celebrated the New Year in my house in Ann Arbor this year, and our funding sources have grown despite all the challenges in the world, and we're still hopeful that we'll get more funding despite all that's happening. So I'm going to stop here. I know I spoke a long time, but
That was incredible. How's everyone feeling? Tired?
did I give you a lot?
Quick stretching?
No, it was great. It's
It
so
was
exciting,
amazing.
actually. So much, so many new things that I was learning. Recent discoveries are so exciting.
So I think we should probably just jump right to the next talk, and then we do have a long Q&A. So we wrote down all of the questions in the chat that we will ask when we get to the Q&A session. But for the purpose of time, I'm going to quickly introduce Dr. Akinci. Dr. Baris Akinci received his MD degree from Ege University. Is that how I said it? Ege University in Turkey.
Aegean, yes.
Yeah, Aegean. That's what it means, Aegean.
Oh, gotcha. He completed his residency fellowship at Doku's Iolul University. I really should have practiced this before. He worked at University of Leeds, UK, diabetes and cardiovascular research, and many other places. I won't name everything because he's done so much work, and the Division of Endocrinology at the University of Michigan with Dr. Oral, and is currently affiliated with Izmir Biomedicine and Genome Center. Dr. Akinci is the founder of the Turkish Lipodystrophy Study Group. His research focuses on the clinical characteristics and natural history of lipodystrophy and the link to metabolic abnormalities and end organ complications. Dr. Akinci is a board member of the European Consortium of Lipodystrophies and a member of the ECLIP Lipodystrophy Registry Board. And with that, we'd love to introduce you and so excited to hear your talk.
Thank you, Kate. So, and then I have to thank everybody for inviting me to this wonderful symposium. So after this amazing talk from Dr. Oral, I don't know if I have anything to add, but I would like to show you some fascinating results from a very newly published article. So that's my goal today. So as you said, I'm based in Turkey on the Aegean coast, a city called Izmir. Now I'm with my parents in another small village on the Aegean coast. So because this is a holiday season for us here after Ramadan, so it starts tomorrow. So I'm with them. So I'm very happy to be part of this event, and then thank you again for this invitation. So I try to prepare some slides to summarize this work for you. Let me first share my screen. Oops. It's not here. You cannot see it, right? Oh, here. Now you'll see it, I believe. Okay. Can you see it? All right. So I will make this full screen, so that will be easier for me. But all right, I can still see you, I believe. Yeah. Let me move this. All right. So this work has been going around for the last 3 years, maybe a bit more, and it was published very recently, just a few months ago. Still online, the full article in print article is not available, but if you just go Google it, or if you just go to PubMed, you can find the approved version of the article, and I believe it will be published as a full paper soon. So this paper is about a tool that can assess the disease burden better in lipodystrophy. So, and I will give you some background on this, and I will also try to tell you why we wanted to develop something like this for the scientific community, also patient community, for everybody who is interested in lipodystrophy. So first of all, I have to just show you some disclosures. The first paragraph is about myself. So I am consulting particularly for Emirates, now is Chiesi, and also several other companies are listed here. And also in the diabetes field, there are several other companies that I'm consulting or kind of being a speaker for. And also, as Kate said, I'm also serving in the European Lipodystrophy group. And also for this specific research, received funding from Emirates, now Chiesi, but the company was not involved in any part of the preparation of the abstract, manuscript, or decision to submit it. So it was kind of support given to the scientific members of this developing group. So why we wanted to develop something like this? So because there was no tool that can measure disease severity in lipodystrophy. And as you all know, and as Dr. Oral very nicely explained, lipodystrophy has a very broad impact on many organ systems and also on the patient's functioning and quality of life. But if you look at the clinical practice, if you just imagine to what happens to you when you see a physician, especially nowadays, many physicians are relying on the laboratory parameters, unfortunately, when it comes to assessing the burden of the disease, and specifically here, lipodystrophy. And if you look at these laboratory parameters, hemoglobin A1C and triglycerides are the most commonly used two basic laboratory parameters to identify the severity of metabolic disease. And these two simple laboratory tests actually serve as co-primary endpoints in clinical studies. They are very helpful, they are very useful, but we believe and we know there is far beyond this in the field of lipodystrophy when it comes to disease severity definition. So, and then I want to give you some examples for this. So as Rebecca did during the Leptin Forum a few months ago, and then these are just some cases that I made up, but I think they can explain the situation a little bit. So here we have two patients, patient A and patient B. They both have familial partial lipodystrophy type 2, the LMNA mutation, typical Dunnigan variety, almost similar age. And if you look at patient A, this patient has diabetes and A1C is 9.1. It's not well controlled. And also fasting glucose is 201. That's also over the limits, obviously. And her triglycerides are more than 600, severely elevated with low HDL. So she is receiving two anti-diabetic agents, metformin and an SGLT2 inhibitor. Also, she is on statins. So she has grade 2 static liver. Her liver functions are normal, and there is no fibrosis in the liver as far as she knows. So there are no end-organ complications. She was never hospitalized, but she has complaints of fatigue. If we look at patient 2 over here, this patient has also diabetes, but diabetes is well controlled. A1C is 6.8. But this patient's diabetes is well controlled on high dose of insulin in combination with multiple anti-diabetics. So compared to patient A, this patient is actually taking multiple medications to control her diabetes. And that's also true for her triglycerides. Her triglycerides are better than patient A, but she is taking 2 medications for lipids. Also, she has similar level of steatotic liver, but she has a bit of fibrosis in her liver. Additionally, she was diagnosed with coronary artery disease 3 years ago, and just seven months ago, she was hospitalized due to a myocardial infarction, and then she got a new stent implementation and was also diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. So if you compare these two patients, obviously the patient B, and also she has a little bit of kidney problem here, has a more severe disease in midst of organ problems, right? But if you just look at the metabolic profile of these patients at that particular visit, patient A actually has worse metabolic control compared to patient B. So then does it make patient A more severe, with a more severe disease, or is the patient A still the one having more severe disease? That was the question for us. And now I think more typical samples can be found in the field of generalized lipodystrophy. Here we have two patients again, 15-year-old one with CGL1 and 13-year-old one with CGL2. Both are females. And the first patient has diabetes that was developed at the age of 9. She's on metformin and A1C is 8.2. Triglycerides are elevated, 416. She has enlarged liver, grade 3 steatosis, but only mild fibrosis. She has a bit of proteinuria, but her kidney functions or creatinine clearance is normal and she has no menses yet. If we look at patient B has no diabetes yet. She's not diabetic at all. And triglycerides are a little bit high, very slightly, 200 on 212. So normally we call it elevated after 200, between 150 and 200 is borderline level. So she has a very slightly elevated triglycerides. No diabetes, very slightly elevated triglycerides. But what does she have? She has a liver that is totally cirrhotic with grade 4 fibrosis. And she was hospitalized 8 months ago due to gastrointestinal bleeding that happened due to liver cirrhosis and received multiple blood transfusions, a very severe event, right? A little bit affected kidney functions, but no proteinuria. Maybe the kidney functions are affected because of the liver disease here. And then again, no menses yet. So if you look at these two patients, the first patient has multiple things, but none of them are very severe. They are still severe, but none of them are very severe. But in the patient B scenario, she's not diabetic, triglycerides are almost normal, but she has a very important organ function defect here, driving the disease severity, that is cirrhotic liver. So if you only consider metabolic parameters, you will say, all right, patient A has more severe disease. But here the liver is so important and a vital organ, and making patient B much more severe than patient A, in my opinion. So these are this kind of disconnect in clinical practice that we want to improve a little bit, and then try to come up with something that can help physicians, patients, everybody in the field to assess this disease burden better. So we wanted to create a scoring system that can assess the disease burden beyond these simple laboratory assessments. And we thought this could be an integrated assessment tool for disease burden, can potentially use to evaluate a patient's status and then monitor disease progression and identify treatment benefits. And also compare outcomes in different patient populations. Also, they can also serve as endpoints in the clinical studies. So this work started in 2021, and we had an initial meeting with key opinion leaders. This was followed with an establishment of a development group in December 2021. This group had 6 experts in lipodystrophy, and this group worked on generation of the first draft and also domain selection. So, and also this group worked on the weighting of different items and domains, and this group used hypothetical patient profiles to do so, and also used something called clinical global impression scale that is actually based on the subjective assessment of the experts to compare with the scores that we are developing, because we had to have something for comparison, and we thought this would be helpful for our purpose. So, and then we generated the very first draft, and then we tested this draft as a small group with 3 experts and 9 patient scenarios, and then we used another 12 patient scenarios after making those revisions to that first draft. And then we invited 3 additional experts to review what we did so far and make some critics on this. So these 3 additional experts also suggested additional revisions, and then we met with patient organization leaders in May 2022. In the first meeting, we had representatives from 3 countries, United States, United Kingdom, and Canada. So finally, we had our tool, and then we had to optimize and validate this tool, and we needed more experts, and we invited 31 international experts from a list of countries, as you can see over here, and we used 20 de-identified patient profiles from 2 different clinical visits. We had meetings with these experts. Every single meeting was like 4 hours, and then we had, I believe I had more than 10 meetings with the experts. So 28 of them returned the forms, and then we also had meetings with 9 representatives from patient organizations, this time from the US, UK, Canada, France, Germany, Spain, and Brazil. And then that was not enough, because at this point, so we thought, all right, we did our job, so it's validated now, and we submitted this article to JCNM. We had very nice critics, but one major critic was this needed to be externally validated using real patient data. And then I personally thought at that point, so okay, so maybe we should just publish this and do this external validation later. But the editor and the reviewers, they were not happy with that. So and they reject our article. They said you had to do external validation, and that was an extra work for us. But luckily, Dr. Brown from NIH and Dr. Oral from University of Michigan were very keen to do this additional work, and then they did this. So with 62 subjects with generalized lipodystrophy at the NIH clinical studies as listed here, and also 17 subjects in the partial lipodystrophy studies at the University of Michigan as listed here. Data from these patients were tested to see the performance of the tool that we developed. So here is the final version of the tool. So, and then there are questions, but I'm just going to show you what is included here. So there are different data elements here. For example, we have diabetes and insulin resistance for sure. We have microvascular complications, we have lipids, and for all of these domains, we have different domain elements. And then there are different scores for all of these domains, and these are all details. I'm not going to go there, but I would like to just show you the list of these different domain elements here. And then we have then organ complications. For example, cardiovascular disease. It's a huge impact here. So it is contributing like with 25% to the total score. Obviously, nobody can actually get all of these scores, right? So nobody will have like coronary artery disease, cerebrovascular disease, peripheral disease, amputation, all of these at the same time. But even though you have only a few of them, still it will contribute significantly to the total score. And liver is here as another important organ. And as you can see here, there are some elements listed here looking at the lifelong occurrence, but some elements, for example, liver event in the last year is looking for the things that happened during the last year. This is important for us to monitor changes in your disease state, because sometimes you have something, but nothing happens for years. So your disease stays stable in means of severity. But in some cases, there are additional things happening over time, and we really wanted to catch those newly developing things. That's why we have some questions in purpose asking about the last year. Then we have kidney functions, we have reproductive systems, and we know actually patients with lipodystrophy are suffering from more. That's why we have this other condition here. So first, when we were developing this, we had a huge list of different organ systems. Then we thought, so if we create something like this, it will be great, but nobody probably will use it. So that's why we tried to simplify this, and we created this other condition domain, which is adding extra scores based on additional health issues that the patient is suffering. So here are the boring statistics. And I'm drinking from my Turkish coffee here. So my sister just brought this for me. So here is the feasibility and content validity. So if you look at these scores from physicians and also patient organization leaders, they're fairly well, right? So if you look at the reproductive system and other conditions, maybe these scores are a little bit lower from treating physicians, but we knew, especially the other condition domain was not perfect, but still doing our job here. And also, if you look at reliability, so this is like when different people are using this, is this still almost the same between different people? Yeah, it is performing very well. Almost everybody has the same score. Still, other condition is something here popping up, but that's just a limitation for us still making the job. And then if you look at the correlation between the expert assessment and the score, there are very strong correlations. So when the experts evaluate these patients like they are in their clinic, and then if we calculate the score and look at the correlations of these two things, they are very fairly correlated to each other, which is very good news for us. And also we asked two experts about the clinically important difference. So what would be the important difference for this score for you in your clinical practice? And they said around 20-25% change in the total score will be clinically important. So this change can develop or occur in like 6 months, 1 year, and maybe 5 years. It can change based on the patient characteristic, but if this changes above these threshold levels, this could be clinically significant for the clinicians. And then we thought if we can create an app for this, it will be helpful for everybody, and also it will be useful for everybody. So this is the app developed now. It's active, and here is the website. If you just go there, you can actually try it. So this is important because now larger audience of clinicians worldwide can use it. So it's a user friendly and also supporting user engagement. Important thing is there is no identifying information here. You don't need to enter anything identifying yourself for this app. And then these patient elements are not stored. So whatever you enter there, when the score is calculated, it's gone. But it gives you an opportunity to save your own score, or your physician have this own score without any identifiers. This is important because this will help create a user-limited repository, and then will be helpful for comparison. And also, this app is using the expert assessments as a comparison tool. If you look at the screen on the right here, so there is a line with red showing your patient score, and it is comparing them to other patients' average level. So by looking at this, you can see, oh, my patient has like mild severe disease based on the other patients compared to other patients. Or if you look at this and your score is like, let's say 80, 90, here the example has 24, but if you're like 90, oh, this is like the most extreme version of disease severity based on this assessment. Then please look at this. The maximum score is more than 300. But if somebody has a score like 80, 90, even 70, this is still extremely severe because, you don't need to have everything, right? If you have like a very severe cardiovascular disease, then your disease is very severe. You don't need to have like liver disease, kidney disease. So just cardiovascular disease, if it is very severe, can change things for you. And also this can be true for liver disease and sometimes kidney disease. That's why it is nobody is scoring the maximum score, but just maybe 30%, 25% of the maximum score can be still associated with very severe disease. And this is the real patient data from the NIH and from the University of Michigan. So here we have two different patient cohorts with generalized lipodystrophy and partial lipodystrophy. And we have data before leptin and after leptin treatment. And if you look at the generalized lipodystrophy cohort on the left side, you can see very nice reduction in the severity score even after 6 months. And this improvement becomes more prominent after 1 year. If you look at the partial lipodystrophy scores, there is a slight change at month 6. This change becomes a bit more prominent at year 1. These results, both for generalized lipodystrophy and partial lipodystrophy, they are all statistically significant. However, the magnitude of change is different. And then that actually correlates with what we see in our clinical practice, right? In generalized lipodystrophy, treatment benefit is always more visible with leptin. In partial lipodystrophy, you still have this benefit, but it is different. The magnitude is different than generalized lipodystrophy. One may ask question, why the baseline disease severity is more in partial lipodystrophy? Because these patients were all older than the generalized lipodystrophy patients at baseline. So that can explain this baseline disease severity difference in these two cohorts. So here are my conclusions. So this new tool holds the potential to assess comprehensive disease burden in lipodystrophy, and it can improve patient monitoring practices and also help improve patient care and facilitate more effective clinical trial designs. It can serve as an objective endpoint. And also, using an online platform improves its functionality, making it easier for people to use, feasible for the lipodystrophy community. And also, it's very important to continue these collaborative efforts and also external validation processes to improve the potential of this tool in the field of lipodystrophy. And this brings me to the next steps point, because we have limitations in this study. I mean, it's like 3 years of, maybe 4 years of work, and a lot of effort. A lot of physicians, a lot of patient representatives are here, but still there are limitations. Still, there are things that we need to improve. First of all, we need to test this in larger patient communities. We know still our data is limited, especially pediatric case scenarios are limited. But the good news is there are several centers working on this actively, and also Dr. Oral is trying to implement this in the prospective allele registry, which is great news. And also here in Turkey, our pediatric endocrinology collaborators, they are trying to generate a real-world pediatric age onset data set. And these things are on their way, so they will be improving our understanding about this, the feasibility of this tool in real clinical practice. But the most important thing here is the tool is only looking at the clinical part of the disease, not assessing the patient perspective. So this was actually the very first critique that we had from the patient representative. So because it was very clearly highlighted that there was a disconnect here, and we had to do something about this. But it was already very complex, and we thought, all right, let's do this way. So let's develop this first, and then we can develop something directly assessing the patient perspective in lipodystrophy as a patient-reported outcome measure. So we know there is an urgent need for this, and then we are working on this. And then right after my talk, I know Dr. Oral will comment on this, because Dr. Oral is really putting a lot of effort on developing this with collaboration with patient leaders in this. And then I have to thank several people here. So, I mean, they have a huge list of physicians. I didn't bring this list over here. So, because I entered the paper to the JCM website. I mean, it was like more than 2 hours for me to add all of the authors to the paper. So, but here we have special people to thank. So all of these people listed here took a really important part for our understanding how we improve this tool during this development stage, and then they help us to develop this. They help us to make this happen. So Andrew Stratton from Lipodystrophy United, Rebecca Sanders, Lipodystrophy UK, Sonia Rehal, I saw her. She just joined from Lipodystrophy Canada, Naka from Spain with Juan, and Blandine from France and with Genevieve, and also Roberto from Brazil and Sabine from Germany. I thank you all a lot. Without your help, it was not possible to accomplish. Thank you.
This is really exciting, Baris. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to, having the flip side of it, something that we can use. But for now, we'll link this link to on the website so that all of you can share it with your physicians as a way for them to really better understand the disease, frankly. Not all physicians understand lipodystrophy, and they don't know what to look for. And so using this tool is actually giving them clues, and or not even clues, like direct instructions on things that they should be evaluating when they think of your whole body as their patient.
Thank you, Andrea.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. That was super interesting. I've heard this many times, but every time I gain knowledge. And so if you want to rewatch this whole thing, we will record it and have it available with every language that you may need. So I encourage you to watch that again because that was really interesting. And Dr. Oral too, thank you so much. We're now going to move into a Q&A. We want this to be, we're glad we did face-to-face and not webinar Zoom because we're literally face-to-face. And this is our opportunity to ask the experts questions. We have a couple people that we haven't introduced to help answer questions. One is Zainab Alzoubi. She's a diabetic intern at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with a strong research focus on nutrition, gut health, and cancer treatment. She herself has acquired generalized lipodystrophy. She has presented her work in multiple scientific conferences and has earned several research grants and awards recognizing her contributions to the field. She's really passionate about science, communication, nutrition education, and exploring the connection between diet, metabolism, and well-being. We hear you all loud and clear when the patient community keeps saying we need more diet management and lifestyle recommendations. So we hope to continue working with multiple people on this, and we're excited for the talk. And Sonia is also here. Sonia Rehal is an educator at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and the director for Lipodystrophy Canada, which is the nonprofit organization supporting lipodystrophy patients and caregivers in Canada, and she works very closely with us. She has lipodystrophy herself, and she's been advocating for years. So we're really excited to have her step in for questions, and also Andrea to step in for questions. And Sharon, I would love for you to introduce Yael, who also answer questions.
Professor Yael Leventhal is the head of the Department of Pediatric Endocrinology at Dana Durek Pediatric Hospital in Sourasky, Tel Aviv Medical Center in Israel. She is a leading expert in pediatric metabolic and endocrine disorders with a special focus in rare and complex conditions such as lipodystrophy and childhood diabetes. She is a member of the European Consortium of Lipodystrophy as well. And she's my endocrinologist, my amazing endocrinologist.
So we've gotten some questions in the chat. Merve and Dr. Oral have been answering them. Are you all seeing that? Is there any questions that you all put in the chat that you don't feel like have been clarified? Just starting with the questions we have so far.
Maybe I will start with a question that I didn't see an answer in the chat. There has been a link between having a lot of insulin in your blood and increased cancer risks, such as breast cancer and colorectal cancer. Is there a greater incidence of cancer in patients with lipodystrophy?
Do you want me to try to answer? Yeah, do you want to start or?
Why don't you answer and
Okay,
go
so
ahead.
I mean, in our registry, we do see some cancers, you know, that have developed in our patients over time. And the cancers that we see the most are breast cancer and endometrial cancer. Both of these are associated with insulin resistance in general, you know, across epidemiological studies. I don't think we're seeing more than, you know, what we see in type 2 diabetes, insulin resistant populations. That's my impression at this point. But, you know, one of the reasons why we want to extend our observation to, you know, lots of years prospectively is really trying to answer that question, you know, because if we follow patients prospectively, then we could accurately say, okay, this many patient under observation developed this complication. And then we can look at those historical data. At this point in time, we're sort of seeing what we would expect from the type 2 diabetes, severe insulin resistance populations.
I would like to mention that there are those who have mentioned that there's an increased risk of papillary thyroid carcinoma. And some people are taking a look at that, but it has nothing to do with the mechanism of obesity, insulin resistance, and whatever. I do know that some researchers are taking a look into this entity of papillary thyroid carcinoma.
With insulin resistance, is that, or in general in lipodystrophy?
No, in general, with nothing having to do with insulin, not in the mechanism of insulin resistance. I'm mentioning another cancer, you know,
Another cancer, yeah.
nothing to do with the insulin resistance now.
Great, thanks. I think that's something that came up a lot in the questions that patients sent us before and now in the chat, is what is the difference between the GLP-1 agonist and the GIP medications? And can patients with lipodystrophy take those medications with a past pancreatitis?
Do you want me to get it, or Baris or Yael, do you want to start and then I can?
Yeah, Dr. Oral, please go ahead.
Okay, so I tried to write the difference in the chat as well. So the gut makes two different hormones. One of them is called GLP-1, the other one is called GIP. They're sort of like the yin yang hormones of the gut, and their job is to sort of prepare the gut to receive food, and then to prepare the other hormones that have to come in for appropriate use of nutrients. So these hormones communicate to the pancreas, to the brain. They also work to adjust, you know, how food passes, the rate at which food passes through the GI tract from the stomach into the gut, and then how it progresses in the gut. So some of their actions are complementary, but they diverge in some ways. So the semaglutide sold in the US under two different names, Wegovy or Ozempic, is an agonist, which means that it activates GLP-1 receptors. Okay, so one of those hormones, not both, just one. And it works by reducing food's passage through the gut, like it's the rate at which food passes, slows gastric emptying, sends a message to the brain that there is food and don't eat as much, and sends a message to the pancreas to make more insulin. So tirzepatide has the ability to activate both GIP and GLP-1 receptors, and it is thought that by activating GIP, the brain's response to GLP-1 is enhanced. You know, so that seems to be the central nervous system activity. There are also GIP receptors in the adipose tissue, and it is thought that activating those GIP receptors can turn fat tissue from white adipose tissue to more like brown adipose tissue, so increase the energy expenditure of adipose tissue. Yeah, so that's one of the extra mechanisms that come when you take tirzepatide as opposed to semaglutide. And then, so in general, tirzepatide is stronger in its ability to reduce food intake and lead to more weight loss, and then reduce hemoglobin A1C a little bit more together. So there's a little bit of a difference in the potency of those using those two drugs. Also, tolerability is improved in patients overall across the diabetes spectrum with regards to the nausea side effect of these drugs. So people tolerate tirzepatide a bit better. In terms of the ability to take these drugs with prior history of pancreatitis, at the beginning, we were very worried about it. But right now, like I think we've gotten braver and braver prescribing these classes of drugs. In the US, which drug that you can have access to is dictated somewhat by the insurance. Not all insurances are paying or covering both drugs equally. Sometimes they give stepwise, permission. So you would have to be on both, on some GLP-1 agonist first, then you can go to the combined if you don't have the best response. Or sometimes it's just purely, what the manufacturer, which manufacturer made the agreement with the insurance carrier. So when we prescribe it, to a patient on clinical grounds, our hands are a little bit tied with what we can prescribe based on what the insurance would cover. Basically, my current clinical practice is that if I believe that somebody needs these drugs, I start with what the insurance would first allow, and then try to see if I could get them to the what I think is the best for them, in a stepwise fashion, try to make the case for that. When we do a trial, we now have a funding, hopefully we will receive our funding. We haven't gotten our grant award yet, but our grant scored high and we expect to get funded. We will, anything can happen at the federal government right now, but we hope to be funded. So keep your fingers crossed for me. We will provide the study drug, tirzepatide, which is marketed with the names Mounjaro or Zepbound in the US. And in terms of prior history of pancreatitis, we've gotten braver, and I haven't really, with tirzepatide, I haven't seen anybody develop pancreatitis. With GLP-1, we've seen it only twice. And I think that there were reasons why the patients develop pancreatitis, like a break in therapy, like an acute break in therapy. So if somebody has had prior history of pancreatitis, what I do is I image the pancreas, then I send them to a pancreas specialist. Okay, so and we may end up doing like an EGD or something, look through the bile duct, look to see if there are gallstones or biliary obstruction, and and get all of those things cleared. And then, we prescribe, if, the pancreas specialist works with me. And with that approach, we've done pretty well. We've gotten some patients undergo cholecystectomy, for example, prior to starting the drug. That's sort of our current approach and, my current recommendations. There's a lot of value in using this class of drugs in our patient population. And I think Yael has some experience even in generalized lipodystrophy, right? Do you want to say something about
Yes. So
I
it's
have just a few, but you have more, maybe.
It's really exciting times right now because there's so many new medications that weren't around in the past. I've been working in the field since the year 2000, and it's just like all these new medications are there. And you gave a wonderful overview explaining the differences between these two medications. And the ones that you were describing are administered subcutaneously. Semaglutide can also be given orally. It's a GLP-1 also that you can give it orally. Now, with our patients, when we do administer either the tirzepatide or the Wegovy or Ozempic, we always have the dietitian in the picture. So the dietitian really assists the patients and recommending which foods will help them, whether they suffer from nausea or diarrhea or constipation. So every patient has precision dietary medical nutrition to assist them. So your job is very important. I don't know how to pronounce your name, Zainab Alzoubi. Pardon? How do you pronounce your name?
Zainab, right?
Zainab, you
Yeah.
have such an important role. I think that the dietitian is really a superstar in our clinic because all the patients meet with the dietitian. It's so important. And then regarding generalized lipodystrophy, there has been a publication in actually a CPIN knockout mice that also Elif is familiar with. We discussed this, where generalized lipodystrophy, they received liraglutide, which is the once daily, for 14 days, and saw what happened in this mouse model. And I have a story of a patient with generalized lipodystrophy, which we've published now in the Diabetes Care recently, who has generalized lipodystrophy, and she received an insulin. She was receiving leptin already for years upon years, but she was receiving concentrated insulin to gel in the doses of 300 units per day, even when she was weighing only 40 kilograms. And we managed to take her off insulin, and she's only on semaglutide orally at a dose of 14 milligrams per day. And it's amazing for her because I know that a lot of the, excuse me, patients with generalized lipodystrophy have problems with injection because they don't really have too much subcutaneous tissue. I'm sure that also Baris and Elif find this, difficult at times where to inject the insulin. So we've had some good experiences, and also with partial lipodystrophy, some of my patients prefer not to get injections, but prefer to have oral therapy. And we've seen an improvement in the liver disease, in the fatty liver disease, and also an improvement in the hyperphagia that they were, witnessing before. So clinical improvements, as well as one of the patients was having amenorrhea secondary to PCOS because of severe insulin resistance, and that's really helped her out as well. So I'm sure that as the time progresses, we'll have more and more data on this. I think maybe Baris also has treated some patients with GLP-1s.
So the access to GLP-1 agonists in Turkey is another story. So I don't have that experience, unfortunately, but I'm,
So, Baris,
following.
I heard that they actually are selling Ozempic without the prescription now in some drugstores in Turkey.
No, Ozempic is now an approved medication, I think,
Or weight loss, like people are
for weight loss
buying
and
it.
then diabetes, actually, type 2 diabetes. Yeah. But, when it comes to reimbursement, the rules are very strict here. So,
Yeah, they're
so,
not covering
no, they're not covering. So
Social Security.
for obesity, sometimes people are paying out of their pocket, but I think the landscape here is totally different than the rest of the world, unfortunately.
Well, more to come. Again, this participating in the research studies and also sharing your experiences with the community help us to really better understand the holistic. It's very exciting to see these treatments reducing some of the challenges that we see on paper. But we also want to know, like, how's everyone feeling? Do you have more energy? Are you feeling less depressed? How's your pain level, right? So, because I think all of this is also really important to thinking about what treatment or multiple treatments are best for all of us. So thanks so much for that. I'm going to ask a question that comes up a lot that I think we probably, all of us, can do better at understanding and thinking about. And that is, I know the answer. So this is just, you know, does lipodystrophy, there's a lot of women on this call. Does lipodystrophy just impact women? And the not surprising, as I said, this is rhetorical. No, it doesn't. It impacts men just as much. But I'd love to hear Dr. Rehal, you and Dr. Leventhal and Dr. Akinci talk about how we can really improve awareness of this disease in both genders, and what can we do as community members to make sure that our families get tested, especially the males in our families. So what do you recommend folks look for?
Shall I start, or Baris, do you
Sure.
want to start?
Anyone can
Baris,
start.
maybe Baris, you start this time.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, Andrea is right, I believe so. I think everybody has more female patients than male patients in the world. So it's the same situation is true in European centers as well, as far as I know. But, you know, in Turkey and also in other Middle Eastern countries, I believe congenital generalized lipodystrophy is also quite common. But if you look at this disease state, so for congenital generalized lipodystrophy, I think males can be diagnosed maybe a bit later than females, but they can be diagnosed at some point. Still, there are more females, or still the diagnosis is a bit easier for females. But I think the most important disbalance is happening in the field of familial partial lipodystrophy. So also, although it's an autosomal dominant disease mostly, which means both genders should be affected equally, 70%, sometimes more than 70% of the patients are females. So because they are developing phenotype, especially after puberty, more clearly, and it's very easy to have males unrecognized for many, many years. So one good strategy would be genetic testing in these families, because when you have a patient diagnosed with familial partial lipodystrophy, caused by, let's say, a lamin mutation, so then there is a 50% chance of having another sister or brother as well, and also mother or father, still 50%, right? So, and I think all of these people should be seen by the clinician, and then especially for males, the clinician has to be very careful and it has to look for even small changes, metabolic changes, because in males, that's very obvious. I think Dr. Leventhal and Dr. Oral will confirm this. Males develop metabolic disease far later, and sometimes if they are young enough, they don't have any metabolic disease at all, but they still have the disease. And I think it's important still recognize it, because it's not only metabolic disease. These patients, based on the molecular etiology, can develop different things. So it is still important to diagnose them. So I think we should do more to increase the awareness for these families, especially for males, and especially for clinicians, for like not lipodystrophy experts, like diabetes experts, endocrinologists, even internists. So they have to be really aware of this mild phenotype in some of these patients, but still the importance of making the right diagnosis on them. And then they have to really do a very careful physical examination and then ask for the family history, any sign of metabolic, disturbance, or, any sign of fat loss, etc. And then if they have any suspicion, they should test these patients, or they should refer these patients to centers with expertise in lipodystrophy.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back in, and then I'd love to hear from the others. I think your tool showed us earlier, Baris, that it's a mistake to say, oh, they don't have diabetes or they don't have high triglycerides, so everything's fine, right? We now understand that that is a mistake. And so I think a real challenge we face in the community when folks say, oh, I think my brother has it, or I think my son has it, but he doesn't have diabetes, so he's fine. I think the real challenge is really explaining to folks that it's a progressive disease, and to assume you're fine forever may be an oversight, and paying attention closely can prevent a stroke, prevent my father, for example, has lipodystrophy. That's where I got mine. And he was an incredible athlete and in seemingly excellent condition, but because he thought his lipodystrophy was mild, he really kind of ignored, and then he had a very severe stroke that he has not recovered from. And I mean, that doesn't mean that's everybody's journey, but it really is part of the testament that you can't just look at those two numbers and assume that everything's fully under control. Yael or Elif, do you want to add to the
I
thought?
I think for sure, you know, that it would be important to look at like the whole body, right? You know, what we have this diagram of all the systems that get impacted by lipodystrophy. So making the diagnosis and making sure that you've thought through all of the organ systems is really important. There, having said all of that, though, the disease does present more severely in females, right? You know, in women. And there's probably a biological reason for that, right? You know, the fat tissue serves a more important role in the female body, especially that gluteofemoral fat depot serves like an important function in the female body metabolically, and the absence of it does cause more of a metabolic havoc than it would in men who use their muscles a little bit more for their metabolic overall health, I think. But that doesn't mean that, you know, like the different genetic perturbations will have still impact that's independent of the fat loss directly on the liver or on the heart, you know, so those need to be really looked for. And as you said, some things could be prevented if you make the diagnosis earlier. So I often see like the PPAR gamma variant not diagnosed in men because they look fine. You know, physically it's even harder in women to make the diagnosis. It's a milder phenotype in women, but the metabolic disease might be really severe in both sexes. And patients may have like a splenomegaly and other things, you know, that may give the clue for the diagnosis. Again, you know, not making the diagnosis also impacts the future generations, because these are autosomal dominant, and a man needs to know that his daughters will have a high chance of 50% chance of having the condition, so that they could get tested. So it's like a cascade, right? Like you have to make the diagnosis and then could do the cascade testing appropriately.
We normally, like after meeting the patient and seeing pictures of them from a young childhood as they progress, also to hear the family, about the family. And sometimes you can have the exact same mutation with a mother and her two daughters, and they have different phenotypic spectrum of the disease. You can have the same genotype but a different phenotype. In the sense of the presentation. But in any case, in order to make sure that we're not missing the males and missing and misdiagnosing or not diagnosing them, actually, it's very important to meet the whole family. So I, in my clinic, prefer to meet as many family members as possible in order to really see the bigger picture. We do a family tree and we hear about the different illnesses that they have. And there are certain things which sort of turn on, you know, a red flag that we should really make sure that the father comes in or the brothers come in and not only the sisters.
There's a quick question in the chat. Are genotype and phenotype the same thing? So just to clarify that, you want to do that for our for
Yeah,
Jen? Mhm.
sure. Genotype are your genes, and phenotype is the clinical presentation that you have. And nowadays we have a new term called endotype, which is the biological mechanism. So we can have the same, we no longer say mutation, we say the same genetic aberration, the same change in the genes, but different clinical presentation. For example, the mother might have repeated episodes of pancreatitis, and her daughter might have the hyperandrogenism. And Baris and I presented together in a conference that we had in Israel a while back in Haifa, and we showed a family where the different members had different presentations, and we're all familiar. If on this Zoom today there are people who are family members, you know that you might come from the same genes but have different presentations of the disease. So that would be the phenotype. And then the endotype would mean that it's very different if the presentation is in young childhood versus later on in life. It might be that within the same family, already at the age of 4 or 5, we might have clinical presentation in some of the family members with, like, for example, acquired lipodystrophy, and there are those that only later on in life you'll see the presentation. So that would be like endotype, which has different biological mechanisms. I don't know if Elif wants to add more.
The one thing that I will add is, you know, our group has recently, you know, one of my postdocs is putting data together right now. But there's going to be a manuscript submitted that talks about, you know, if that phenotype gets impacted, whether you inherit the mutation from your mom or you're from your father. So that might be actually a factor in how the disease may present itself. So we've done some statistics to show that so definitely, you know, like the disease presentation could be impacted by even where you live, right? You know, one thing that we're seeing in our registry, because we have patients recruited in Turkey, in the US, or in Brazil, that there are differences, you know, probably the diet, the conditions, the environment, the exposures, you know, are also playing a role in the expression of the disease. So yeah. But regardless, we would like, I mean, I think family cascade testing, once we call the first person who get identified the proband, right? So once a proband is identified, that's the medical jargon for the first person from the family. But the whole family tree needs to be figured out. And if we could actually test the individuals with likelihood of disease, or at least immediate first degree to the proband, we might make impact on comorbidity development. And again, hopefully we'll have preventative therapies, right? Things that really do modify disease course. So it will make a difference to be diagnosed earlier.
Yeah, I'm gonna just, Sharon, I know you have another question, but since we're on this topic, I'm super interested. This is really probably for a prompt for more research, but taking your example, I'm the proband in the family. My lipodystrophy was diagnosed first. And while we thought about the phenotype, the presentation, it was really obvious that I'd gotten it from my dad, who'd gotten it from his mom, based on the way we looked and our challenges. We tested my dad, my grandmother had passed, and confirmed. We also tested Kate. Kate, I don't think you mind because you've shared this, and my other daughter, who do not have the disease. Are we looking at, or should we be looking at, the children and the family members who do not have the mutation, but because Kate and Ava grew inside my body and were exposed to some of the challenges, my physical challenges, is it possible that even though they don't have the mutation that I have, they could still also experience challenges that they wouldn't have if I didn't have lipodystrophy? Do we know that yet? Are those things to look at?
So this is a really good and timely question because, you know, what's happening to the developing fetus, inside the mother's womb, could program some metabolic disease for that developing fetus down the road. So the conditions that the fetus lives in is important, and that's we call that like epigenetic influences. It's easier to study epigenetics from paternal lines because you could take you could change the condition that the men are metabolically, and then you have access to their sperm, right? Yeah, you can have access to the sperm. It's not that easy to have access to the eggs from women, to study the epigenetic signatures. But just by looking at what's happening with the metabolic conditions of the dads, you could see that there are permanent epigenetic signature on the sperm, right? So, for example, type 1 diabetes, that's poorly controlled, and you put those patients into control, and then you look at the sperm, you see metabolic gene programs change pretty drastically with improving the control of the fathers or the fathers to be, same thing, bariatric surgery has been studied as an influence of epigenetic signature in sperm. Having morbid obesity, prior to going to bariatric surgery, then you go through bariatric surgery, and then again, you can, the researchers have looked at epigenetic signatures and have found. For the metabolic disease epigenetic signatures from women, sheep have been studied, good control of metabolic factors or obesity or hyperglycemia during pregnancy, for example, could program metabolic disease for the better or for the worse, depending on, what factor was studied. So more research needs to be done, that's the bottom line. But I think, by studying the paternal versus maternal inheritance patterns and how that changes phenotype is sort of hopefully opening the box into this, like epigenetic signatures on the lines. So hopefully we'll be able to look at things like this a little bit more, and what happens through that whole reproductive cycle of patients who have the mutation and then who are actually bearing children, and then following the offspring through, those kinds of studies hopefully can be launched, should be launched.
Yeah. Not specifically for lipodystrophy per se, but we do know that, for example, girls that were exposed to moms that have PCOS, then they have an increased likelihood of having PCOS themselves. Also the issue of being exposed, like Elif said, to hyperglycemia increases the likelihood of them later on having metabolic disease or components of it, or even type 2 diabetes. So we do know that this, like DOHAD, the developmental origins of adult disease, have already in utero beginnings. We know that the foundation to our lifelong health happens in utero. So it depends on how well controlled the woman is when she's pregnant.
And I
Of
also
course,
want
we're
to,
looking, yeah,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to highlight a very simple fact. I think this is very important for the patient community. So because I know, I'm sure everybody is seeing similar stories, but and then Dr. Oral and Dr. Leventhal, they have more experience than myself for sure. But what I'm seeing from our patient community here, so you cannot change your genes maybe, but you can change your lifestyle. You can follow a healthy lifestyle. If you're a smoker, you can quit, right? Those things can be done, right? And then I'm seeing this especially in the field of partial lipodystrophy a lot, because sometimes it's really very difficult to follow a diet, etc., in the absence of leptin signal. But even in the presence of leptin signal, so whether it is replaced or even whether you have it, this is true for type 2 diabetes and other disorders. So it's really very important how you manage environmental things in your own lifestyle, right? So whether you're following a good lifestyle, healthy food, regular exercise, that sort of thing. So based on your clinician suggestions, recommendations, I think it is making a huge difference, especially in patients with partial lipodystrophy, because I know, and I'm sure Dr. Oral and Dr. Leviton know those patients as well. I know patients who had a very, very good disease course for years, but they were so, careful with their lifestyle, etc. And I also know patients, unfortunately, who died as very young adults, but they were like smokers. They were not following a good lifestyle. This is so important. This is something you can change, I believe. This is a very basic, a very simple thing, but it has a huge impact on the disease course in the end of the day. So I think that will be an important. Otherwise, it's a monogenic disease, right? So at least for today, we cannot change that gene for now, but there are still many things, very important things that patient can change.
For sure.
And with that, let's move over to a lifestyle presentation with Zainab. We're so excited to have you, and questions that are unanswered. We obviously need to do more Q&As because we have like a million questions in our document. But we will try to send answers and do a little follow-up email. And thank you all for your questions.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kate, for that. I'll go ahead and share my screen, and then please let me know if you guys can see it. Does it look good? Okay. So I'll go ahead and get started. So kind of as Kate said, I am a current dietetic intern at the University of Illinois, so I have a passion for nutrition. I have completed my master's and bachelor's in nutrition from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I'm going to start off actually with how I came about learning of nutrition. And it really was through the story of my lipodystrophy. And so I actually did not, most of my childhood was not spent in the US. I was born here and then I moved. And so I was living for most of my life in Saudi Arabia. And I want to say that probably the time that now, like in retrospect, I realize I probably had lipodystrophy was probably around the age of 6. And so I have acquired generalized lipodystrophy. So in the beginning, I had very good fat deposits. Like my baby pictures don't look like anything was wrong. And then at the age of 6, I was playing with an exercise machine. This is very specific, but this is kind of the first time that I noticed something changed. And my foot got stuck. So it was like an accident and my foot was like in a lot of pain. And then I was having trouble like putting it down. And so it would kind of like stay raised. And my dad would be like, okay, can you like put it down and level it? And I'm like, I can't, I physically can't. So we would go to like a lot of doctor visits, most of my kindergarten, that's kind of how I remember it. And what they like diagnosed me with was rheumatoid arthritis, but I wasn't in severe pain. So they didn't really give me anything for it. And then we moved. So we moved to Saudi Arabia and we really didn't, we knew I had a rheumatoid arthritis, but we didn't do much about it. And so during that move, I think the first year we were there, I lost all of my fat. And I was just like a very skinny person and we don't really know what happened. And my mom was just like, this is really weird because you just completely lost it. But I wasn't showing any other symptoms. And so again, kind of as Andrea talked about, you don't really see like, oh, there's high like blood glucose levels or triglycerides. Maybe there's something else going on, but we didn't pay much attention to it. It was just like, oh, you're a skinny person. And so I lived with that most of my life. And then I think the first moment that it actually hit was I was having issues with the menstrual cycle. And so that was one point where, they diagnosed me with PCOS or PCOS. And then after that, during college, so I was at around 19, I was like throwing up a lot. And then they checked my blood glucose levels and it was around 400. And then that's when they're like, okay, I think you have type 2 diabetes. And so I started on insulin and metformin pretty quickly. One of the things, now I go back sometimes and I look at those doctor records just to see like what tests did they look for, because now I understand a lot more. They did notice I had fatty liver disease, but never was it brought up. So they were just really treating diabetes. And so the insulin metformin was not working. And so I was just like, okay, this is like, I'm trying so hard to take these medicines. They're painful because again, I don't have any fat deposits, so they're painful, and it's not doing me any good. And they're not listening to me when I keep going back and be like, this is not working for me. Please, like, let's find something different. So that's when I got into nutrition. I just did like my own research, and I was like, okay, maybe there are some things that I can do that are my like lifestyle changes. When I did ask doctors over there, it was like very basic, yeah, just eat healthy, but they were more focused on like, let's get you on insulin. And even though the insulin wasn't working. So then nothing was getting fixed. And so I moved to the US to actually start college here. So I transferred. I was first in computer science, and then I had like a love for nutrition. So I moved here to get started. And then I met with a physician, an endocrinologist in Urbana-Champaign. And she was the first person to, again, what they typically do is, right, they have to check off all the boxes for themselves. She's like, okay, let's try you back on insulin. Let's see what's going on. And then she was the first person to be like, I think you might have something different. I don't know what this is, but I looked it up and it's something called lipodystrophy. I can't help you, but I think you have this. So I was kind of really like refreshing to have a diagnosis that when I looked it up, I was like, oh yeah, these are all the symptoms that I have. But it was like, okay, now what do I do? Kind of like, okay, I know I have this, but I don't know how to get help. And so it was really through, I want to say fate or luck, that my sister-in-law's father, he's Turkish. And so he actually knew through his connections that there was someone in Michigan who looked at this like at lipodystrophy. So he's like, do you want me to like get you in contact with them? We can kind of get you there. And it was actually both Dr. Akinci and Dr. Oral who were on the email. And we're like, okay, we're going to set up an appointment in Michigan, and you're going to come and you're going to see us, and we're going to see what we can do. And so that was like how it came to the diagnosis. It was a very big struggle because, again, none of my family members, and I come from a big family. I have 6 siblings, and none of them ever had any issues, and it was really just me. And kind of now that you guys mention it, I'm wishing they would get tested too, just to see if there is anything going on, because really my family members haven't come in to those appointments with me or really get tested themselves. But we're still trying to understand how it was just me. Like, we've never seen these in my family tree whatsoever. But again, I also understand there are environmental factors that could play a role. So kind of that's how my interest in nutrition came, was really through how I was diagnosed. And so kind of moving from there, I'd like to talk about nutrition, kind of how nutrition has played a role in my life. And then the things that I've learned through my education, also through my internship that I'm currently doing, and things that have worked for me. And then again, everybody's different, and this can be a much more personalized approach. Everyone behaves differently. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just the idea of how nutrition is fuel. And so nutrition can be sometimes scary when we think about like foods, labeling them as good and bad. And sometimes people don't really want to pay much attention to that. But food is something that's supposed to be good. It gives you energy. It helps repair your body. It's important for growth. And it does play a role in disease management. And so really, I like to think of food as medicine. But it doesn't always have to feel like something that's, kind of a worrisome part. It should be enjoyable. So this is something that you think of brings families together. We eat together. When you're going out to meet a friend, you go out to dinner. Food should be an enjoyment, and it shouldn't feel restrictive. And there's always ways that you can manage your nutrition to help incorporate it in your life, and just understanding what you're consuming and how you can make it taste better to your needs is important. And so the goal is to find a balance. You want to nourish your body while enjoying the flavors, texturals, and cultural food. So don't make it feel restrictive. So the first thing, just really basically, I want to talk about the macronutrients and micronutrients. So the macronutrients are these nutrients that we need them in high amounts. And so they're our primary energy sources. And so if we're thinking of our carbohydrates, so those provide us with glucose. Very basic idea of like a carbohydrate could be something like bread. Bread provides us with those carbohydrates. And they're a primary energy source. And then protein. So protein are found within our meats, and these are broken down into amino acids, and they're really important for cellular function. And then you have your fats, something like olive oil, avocados, salmon contains a lot of fat, so these are broken down into triglycerides, and they're important for cellular integrity. And then we have our micronutrients. So these are needed and they do also support bodily functions. So they work with these macronutrients and they can help with immune function. Something like blood pressure is a good example of those micronutrients. If you're thinking about sodium, potassium, stuff like that, they help supporting that. I'm going to give a lipodystrophy overview just to start. So it's like there are different for everybody kind of what they experience, but I had a high glucose levels and high triglyceride levels can also impact liver function like fatty liver disease. And then some things that you can see more like visually or feeling it, hyperphagia, and then irregular menstrual cycles. This was I had a lot of, so kind of one of the things that I experienced. And so thinking of in the context of blood sugar control and lipodystrophy management, so simple sugars break down really easily and kind of are like a sudden burst of glucose into the bloodstream. So thinking of things like donuts, white bread, or just plain sugar, these are metabolized a lot faster and kind of are broken down really quick. And so they increase your blood sugar a lot. So things to think about is incorporating complex carbohydrates. So fruits and vegetables, whole wheat bread. We never want to think about carbohydrates as something to eliminate completely because they're still important. And so you still want to include that within your diet, but thinking of better sources which will lower that or taper that increase in your blood glucose levels. So I have a diagram over here that kind of shows if you're consuming something like a donut, there is that spike in your blood glucose levels that is a little bit harder to bring down versus if you're eating something like fiber, which are found in fruits and vegetables, it kind of increases at a more steady rate. So something to think about. And so also thinking about in terms of carbohydrates, being able to balance them with fats and protein can help in supporting those stable blood sugars. So recently I've been working with Joyce Patterson, who's a dietitian at the University of Michigan. She works a lot with diabetes and diabetes management. And one of the things we're currently talking about is making sure like all those components within them and kind of even the order in which you eat them can help with reducing that spike in your blood glucose levels. So in terms of fatty liver disease and the fat within your body, so you should try to avoid saturated fat. So those are ultra processed foods. So I have another picture here kind of showing that, like, for example, pizza, burgers, all of those processed meats have a lot of saturated fats in them, so you kind of want to avoid that. And what you really want to focus on is lean meats. And so something like fish and poultry and unsaturated fats can minimize the strain on the liver. And so I have examples here of what could be within the range of unsaturated fats. And that would be within this category of olive oil, salmon, avocados, better to consume. I did get a question about trying to talk about the idea of triglycerides, cholesterol, and glucose levels. And so I want to bring that kind of wrap that into this. So if you consume like a simple sugar, what typically happens is there will be an increase in blood sugar and then an increase in insulin secretion. And so this will then get stored as a fat globule, and triglyceride storage is within the fat globule. And then when too much fat storage, there's like an increase in fat storage, so leading to just weight gain, there tends to be an increase in cholesterol that is secreted from the fat and kind of leaches into the bloodstream. But in the case of lipodystrophy, when you're consuming simple sugars, since we're not like for me, for example, I'm unable to store any type of fat, so then these fat globules do not exist. And so it increases these circulating triglycerides and cholesterols as well as blood sugar levels. And so this can increase your insulin resistance, fatty liver, and hyperglycemia. So kind of just general tips, things that you want to think about is focusing more on balanced meals. So you want to increase more of those fruits, proteins, unsaturated fats, and less of those processed foods. And then you want to increase your fiber intake. So this helps with decreasing spikes in blood sugar levels, something like whole wheat fruits and vegetables, and then avoid consuming processed foods. So fast foods or ultra processed snacks will really help in maintaining those blood glucose levels as well as triglyceride and cholesterol levels. So this is kind of, I just wanted to like show what kind of a visual thing is just balancing your meals. So you want to have all of those components. You want to make sure you have your source of protein, you want your source of fat, and you want the source of carbs, but you do want to make sure that you are eating, let's say, more whole wheat. Brown rice is a better thing than white rice. You want to include your more of the chicken, fish, so those lean proteins, more fruits and vegetables, and then those healthy oils like olive oil, even nuts are a good source, and then more like avocados, just to help balancing those meals will help then not increase your blood sugars to have those spikes. And so with that, I would like to end with the idea that good nutrition creates health in all areas of our lives. All parts are interconnected. And if you're thinking about nutrition, nutrition really kind of goes through the entire body because you're consuming it. It's reaching all the areas of your body, getting absorbed. And so it really does play an important role in disease management. And with that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. I think that was a really good general presentation. We want to again reiterate that for diet, you really have to speak with your own doctor. Everyone is different, but I love the general understanding. And as we saw in the chat, people feel frustrated because some doctors kind of just say that it's the only answer, and people feel like they have a balanced diet and they're still sick. It's just one tool in your toolbox of treatments for this disease is lifestyle. So we're not prescribing anything. We're just kind of giving general understanding. So yeah. And Rhonda, I see Rhonda has a question.
Hi, it's not so much of a question, but just something that I do for my diet, and this is specifically for women in the United States. I don't know how other countries set up their food markets or grocery stores, but in the United States, typically, if you just shop the perimeter of the grocery store, that is where you need to stay. That's where all your produce is, your lean meats, your, dairy can be there. If you stay out of those center aisles, that's where all your ultra processed foods typically are, and they live there. Again, it's not the same for every store, but a general rule of thumb is that's something I've always used. So I just wanted to say in case it helps someone out.
Great.
I almost always think of you when I'm in the grocery store, Rhonda. I'm not kidding. I'm like doing the square,
Yes.
shopping the round.
That's great advice for US.
So I know we've all been sitting on Zoom for so long, so let's move to Sonia's presentation. She's going to talk about how the patient advocacy groups from around the world collaborate all together. And that's where we will end today. But our collaboration all together does not end today. We're so excited to continue having events like this. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen to show you all Sonia's PowerPoint. Sonia, are you ready?
You can give me 60 seconds and I will be ready.
Perfect. Does anyone have a quick question?
I will ask a question for Zainab. I saw in our Facebook group a conversation about coconut oil. So is coconut oil good for us lipodystrophy patients or not?
That's a good question. I'd say it's okay to consume coconut oil. It is higher a little bit in those saturated fats. But once in a while kind of consuming. Really, the idea is not to completely remove those fats from your diet, but to consume them in limitation. And so reducing how much you're consuming of that is what like is recommended.
So if we need to use, like, what is the best oil for us? Olive oil, avocado oil?
Yes, those two are the ones that personally I use a lot of just because they're more of that unsaturated. So they're giving you all the nutrients that you need, but without that additional like increasing that triglyceride level. So that's kind of the oils that I use, those two specifically. I do sometimes occasionally will use some butter, but that's not like recommended. It's more so like limiting those oils, those more saturated oils. But yeah.
Dr. Oral, do you know, have we done research on coconut oil or MCT, otherwise known as, well, not other,
Well, what we
medium
do,
chain
yeah.
triglyceride oil?
The one thing that we use the MCT oil, which is, you know, the medical MCT oil, not the coconut oil part, is, you know, when we have people in the hospital with pancreatitis and we need to really limit the overall amount of fat. You know, as you know, like, I mean, if you've had this, you know, we keep you MPO, like nothing by mouth for at least 72 hours. And when we reintroduce food, we usually have you on what we call a chylomicron clearing diet, which then is less than 20 grams of fat in a day. And then the carbohydrates that we give are like 15 grams per meal, you know, like at the beginning when we first start. So adding those two, you know, and because we have to stay less than 20 grams of fat, the protein we can give you is going to be very little as well. So when we add everything together, the calories are not quite, you know, they don't meet the calories. So then we use a little bit of MCT oil to help make up for the caloric difference. And they don't get converted into triglycerides like the others. So so there is like a place for the MCT oil, you know, in that chylomicron clearing phase of very high hypertriglyceridemia. So I don't see anybody who's been in the hospital with pancreatitis at our place in a while anyways. So, but I will make sure that Joyce shares the chylomicron clearing diet and recipes. You know, it's something that the FCS folks, you know, the familial hyperchylomicronemia folks have to use almost lifelong. So we've made, you know, like our dietitians, Kathy Rhodes, you know, before she retired, she had made like a whole bunch of recipes, you know, for people to use. And Joyce has those recipes as well. They're kind of copyright protected, but nothing wrong with sharing them. I think they need to be shared. So we'll make sure that, you know, those come to you guys for distribution.
Great. That was a great question. And people ask about that a lot. Does everyone see my screen and Sonia's slides?
Yes.
Great. Okay, Sonia, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Great.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to talk today. It's a huge privilege to be a part of this community. I think it's one of the most supportive communities out there. So thank you so much. And yeah, so I'm kind of finishing up the day to talk a little bit about, you know, the global collaboration when it comes to lipodystrophy awareness and advocacy, and how it's so important for us to have this global collaboration. Kate, there will be an animation on the second slide. Is it possible to go into slideshow mode?
Yeah, I think you have to hit play, Kate, because we see the slide, but it's not in full presentation. So the animation won't work until you.
Play.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry. I got
there
a
you
little
go.
fancy with my PowerPoint. Okay.
Amazing.
So, Kate, you're going to work with me to orchestrate this, okay? All right. So just a little bit about me. My name is Sonia, and I also have partial lipodystrophy. And, you know, I always like to start about telling a little bit about myself and my patient journey. So here you see a road, and, you know, it's important to note the road is not straight, it's squiggly, and at times it's very squiggly. And here I represent myself and my family as these yellow people, and you'll see some more yellow people as we go through the slides. But this is my little family, my myself, my sister, and my mom, and that's how we all started, Kate. And it feels like a video game, but essentially what happened was my mom, at a very young age, had cardiovascular complications from lipodystrophy and passed away when she was 32. I was about 4 when that happened. And so our childhood was really rough, trying to navigate kind of how we were, you know, going to deal with the disease pretty much alone. Hit next, Kate. So in terms of during childhood to young adulthood, we really had a very early onset of signs and symptoms. And we started getting these diagnoses of like multiple metabolic abnormalities just through like the blood work we were getting done at the Children's Hospital, etc. And then finally we were sent over, they were like, this is not a normal endocrine disorder. This is something special. They sent us to genetics, and we were very lucky to have an early diagnosis of familial partial lipodystrophy 2. And so, Kate, you can go on next. Yeah. So basically, my sister and I kind of traveled through life. Again, it was really tough at times. And to be honest, the diagnosis of more medical issues continued, as well as complications from our medical issues. And you know, that involved a lot of us having to go back and forth with our specialists to figure out a good medical management plan. But it didn't seem to work for both of us. And my sister was suffering from, unfortunately, congestive heart failure and diabetes. And Kate, I'll have you hit next again. And unfortunately, she passed away when she was 35. At that time, I was 30. And so now I go through life. Obviously, the future is unknown. But honestly, as I said, I'm so privileged to be a part of this community because there is so much active research going on. So, you know, all we can be is hopeful. So, Kate, hit next. So, I sometimes find myself having a struggle to conceptualize how rare we really are. Like, it's really hard to conceptualize when people say, what does 1 in a million look like? Or what does 3 in a million look like? Or 30 in a million? So right now, according to our latest study, and that's been done by Baris and Dr. Oral, is that it could go upwards to about 30 in a million people will have a genetic lipodystrophy. And so if you look at this visual, you can really appreciate just how rare we are as a community. You know, we are very, very, and it unfortunately is a challenge by being this rare of a population. And so how do we find each other is the key here. So if you hit next. And so as I, you know, said that, you know, we're very, very few when we're sparsed out, but we are many when we're together. And so that is why it is so critical to have an initiative like our World Lipodystrophy Leaders Forum that we do have yearly. We keep in touch. And this is really a global initiative coming from every part of the world, almost every continent. And really what we're trying to do is create a patient community that is global, and that we can find each other quicker, more effectively, and provide the resources we so much need that are so much needed for a rare patient community. And so here you see those yellow people again, and hopefully we can create a larger community together by having these global initiatives happening and our yearly meetings to discuss goals. And you can go next, Kate. And so it's you can leave it here. It's not like there's any animation left. But yeah, so global collaboration is so important, and it's important for many different reasons. But if you look at it as a patient-centered model, you're really looking at the patient benefiting from this global collaboration, in that we can provide them resources. Actually, Kate, you might want to. Oh no, we're good. We're good. In that the patient, we really want to help diagnosis. So increase our diagnosis ability for people who might think that they have lipodystrophy or, have a suspicion. Also to provide resources to the patient, to provide awareness to others, to the caregivers, and just general advocacy. And in turn, by providing patients these resources, and by providing the patient all these supports, you can then have better medical management, and medical management can go hand in hand with novel research, where novel therapeutics can come into play. And so really this benefits everyone to have a global approach to this disease. And yeah, so that's all I wanted to say. I also wanted to put this really pretty picture up because I represent Canada. And if you haven't been to Canada, it's a beautiful place, especially where I live. So I live in a city called Hamilton. And if anybody wants to come visit me, let me know. Give me 2-day notice. But it's apparently...
Is that an open invitation?
Oh, yeah. But you pay for your own. We're not rich here, bro. But it is actually the world capital, the waterfall capital of the world. So definitely beautiful country, and I'm sitting there right now talking to you guys. So thank you so much again for giving me the time to speak to you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Does anyone have any powerful concluding remarks? I feel like so much has been said today, so I can't even think of anything.
Well, I want to thank you all, right, for being here on a Saturday, coming together. But to really see everyone has been great. And I know this community is stronger together. So thank you for organizing it, Kate, and Sharon, and Francesca, Andra. So thank you. Big heart.
Love you all. Have a great Saturday.